Hey, it is 12 noon on Friday, which means it's time for this week's episode of State of Real Estate. My name is John Christmas. The show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We're here every Friday, 12 noon Eastern Time, helping you mastermind to grow your real estate business. But one of the things that's very essential to you really achieving success in anything is staying focused. Because if you're all over the place, if you're doing this and then doing that and doing this and that, you're not going to get anything accomplished because you're going to be pulled in so many different directions. Have you ever felt that you're not really getting accomplished, but you're still more busy than you know what to do with? You're super busy, but you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. It feels like you're spinning your wheels. Yeah, the wheels are moving, but is the truck going? So it's easy to fall into this lack of focus, easy to fall into this just stuck in the same spot. But staying focused, having your eye on the prize, for lack of a better term, is really the key thing that's so important to achieving any success. And what we're going to talk about today is not just about staying focused, because it's a really simple concept. Just pick what you want to do and focus on it until you achieve success. That's it. There we go. We said it. That's all you need to do to stay focused. You understand that. You get the concept. Pick what you want to do. Focus on it. Keep moving towards that and don't get derailed. That's how to stay focused. But now the other question is, well, what is it that you should be focusing on? Because that's also important to factor into all of this as well. Because there are things that are going to yield all kinds of profit and things that are just going to cost you time. So that's what we're talking about today on State of Real Estate. I'm John Christmo. This show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. State of Real Estate. Every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time. Grow your real estate business. You're watching State of Real Estate. State of Real Estate. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of State of Real Estate. So my name is John Carissimo, and what we're talking about today is something that becomes ever more important as we progress into the future, especially being here in 2019, and that's about staying focused. Now, why is this more important today than it was yesterday and all the days previously? The reason why it's more and more important every day to stay focused is every day it seems like there's a new way to make money. There's some new get-rich-quick scheme that's out there. There's some new pyramid, multi-level marketing company. There's some friend that's telling you that maybe they've got a great idea. And what happens if you try to do all these things at once? If you try to do all these things at once and you don't already have something figured out, you're not going to get anywhere. So, look, I'm all about increasing your flows of income, increasing your income streams, but you've got to first get a stream. You at first have to get a trickle to turn that into a bigger stream, to turn that into a massive river of income flowing to you. But you're never going to get there to having that large stream of income coming to you if you're focused on a lot of different things. You want to try to get as great as possible as one thing, and then once you've got that figured out, you can really start turning it more so into a business. You could then start to shift your focus onto other things. You got to, again, keep your eye on the prize. You've got to understand what that finish line is, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. You really, at first and foremost, comes with having a goal. So that's number one. You want to establish what that goal is, and this should be a specific goal. A specific goal with some sort of number to it. This could be a level of income, although that's not the most specific. So especially if you're in real estate, I would get even more specific than that. And that's where you might have to reverse engineer these goals a little bit to be able to figure out, okay, what are the specific, direct, tangible things that I can do to accomplish, $100,000 in income? How many houses do I have to sell? How many buyers do I have to work with? And really having the goals for these different things. Now, even within the real estate space, in the real estate brokerage capacity, as a real estate agent, there's a lot of things you can end up getting thrown all over the place. Can you focus on buyers and sellers at the same time? And the answer is yes, but is that going to be the best use of your time? Now, ultimately, If you've watched these shows before, you know that sellers are ultimately a easier client. They take less time. Maybe they're a little bit harder to get in the first place. Maybe it takes a little bit more time overall, more days go by to get a property sold. But overall, the work that's involved, according to the National Association of Realtors, is 1/3 the amount of time it takes compared to working with a buyer. So you might want to work with sellers, but you're also currently working with buyers. So what you want to do is you want to find if you've got anything that's working right now. If you've got anything that's working right now, let's say you're working with buyers and you're working with some buyers, but you're not really working with a lot of buyers. Maybe there's like one or two that you're working with and you're kind of showing them homes, and maybe eventually they're going to make a contract on one of them and you eventually get paid for this here. And at the same time, you're trying to pick up some listings. Look, that's not a bad idea. There's a lot of agents that do find success just being a real estate agent, not really specializing or being specific in anything. But what you want to do is pour. So imagine you've got a gallon of gas. You've got one of those little tanks of gasoline, one of those red tanks with the yellow straw thing sticking out of it. Now, if you pour that gasoline on a bunch of wood, but this wood is not on fire, might it catch fire? Maybe it will, but will you pouring gasoline on the wood cause the wood to catch fire? And the answer is no. You pour that gasoline on a pile of sticks, a pile of wood, a pile of lumber, it's going to get wet, and it's very dangerous. It could be a very big fire if you actually ignite it. But let's say you've already got a small fire burning with some buyers that you're working with. You've already got a small fire. What's going to happen now when you pour that gasoline on that small fire? That's going to turn into a big fire. You pour it onto a pile of wood where there's no fire, where there's nothing burning already. So let's say you're working with buyers, you have buyers, you haven't worked with any sellers, but you're interested in working with sellers. And ultimately that is a transition you want to make, but get your cash flow right from the buyers. Get your income right from the buyers. You've already found some success working with buyers, double down in the buyers. Now, let's say you don't have any success anywhere. You're brand new to real estate. You haven't sold anything. You haven't bought anything yet. No, what should you focus on? Well, figure out where you could find that ignition, that source of ignition, that little spark, whether that's from somebody who wants to buy a property or maybe somebody you know that wants to sell a property. It's not a fire yet, but that's going to lead you down the path it is that you want to go. And then start doubling down on that and focusing on that. Now, notice here how I'm not talking about focusing on business cards or brochures or websites or marketing or things like that. I'm talking about increasing the volume of clients that you're working with. Staying focused on this, because it's real easy in real estate to get wrapped up in whatever salesperson is calling you. Whatever salesperson from Zillow or Realtor.com or who knows these places that say, oh, we've got a zip code where we could basically charge you money to do your Google pay-per-click for you, or whatever the case may be. You've got all these people. If you don't have a plan, you're going to end up being part of their plan. So you want to have a plan and you want to stay focused on that. Now, if you've been working with buyers and again, my first recommendation is going to be double down on the buyers. Double down on the buyers and what you ultimately want to get to. So there's something from Rich Dad Poor Dad. He's got a book on what's known as the cash flow quadrant. And, Rich Dad Poor Dad, those books, they're really good for really good theoretical type of stuff. And one of the things that's really powerful out of that is, again, this cash flow quadrant where you've got E, S, B, and I. E standing for employee. These are all the different ways you could make money. You can make money as an employee. You can make money off of yourself. This is where most real estate professionals are. You could make money as a business. Very few real estate professionals get to this level because they don't even focus on this as a goal. Because we're going to talk about why this shouldn't be the goal, and this ultimately is. And then also the I is for investor. I really like this because it encapsulates pretty much every way you could possibly make money. Every penny you earn is coming from one of these four quadrants. If you have a job right now where you're paid some sort of salary or hourly wage, you're an employee. And that's not necessarily a bad way to earn income. It's probably the most secure way to earn income out of any of these here. but it's going to have very limited potential. Now, that's where a lot of people will make this transition from being an employee to being a self-employed person. And a self-employed person, a lot of people think that this is the American dream. It's not. We'll talk about getting there in a second. But what's really appealing to people, and this is why a lot of people get started in real estate, is to be in control of their income, to work as much as they want, when they want, to make their own schedule, to be their own boss. That's a self-employed type of person. But what you're doing in the self-employed, really this whole half here, is you're just owning your job. You're still trading your time for money. And look, that's where you've got to start out most of the time. Most people actually don't start in the self-employed quadrant. Most people start as an employee. Almost everyone starts as an employee some way or another, that they're working in some sort of job. They get sick of that job, so then they become a self-employed person. And they're making more money here, but they're hitting that ceiling. They're hitting the limit where they're not able to continue to make more money. And that's where, if you want to grow your income further, you want to first be able to get into the business quadrant. Now, this half over here, the business and the investor quadrant, this is where the most money is able to be made. This a little bit more on the long term, this usually more on the short term, that you could make massive amounts of money. And this is what you're going to make a pivot in your real estate career. You're going to go from being the one man or one woman operation that's just working with buyers nonstop to be able to grow yourself. You know, the word that people use in real estate all the time is a team. That you have a team of people. And really this starts out with just adding on maybe one person. Maybe you're adding on an administrative assistant just to help you out with all the paperwork because you've become successful working with buyers. Now, before you start transitioning over to sellers, because working on the listing side of things, it's a completely different skill set. It's a completely different set of things you do. Yes, your real estate license allows you to do either, but that doesn't mean you should try to learn both of these at the same time and not be focused on any one particular thing. So maybe you're working with buyers and you're focused on buyers and you're doing decent with buyers. You're getting deals closed, but now you're getting burned out because it's taking a lot of time for these buyers. So what do? Maybe you hire some sort of administrative assistant. That is your first step from being a self-employed person to being a business. Now, why do you want to make this transition? Why do you want to pay for an assistant when you could just do that yourself? Why wouldn't you just do it yourself? Because if you do it yourself, yes, you're going to keep 100% of the money. You get to keep 100% or almost 100%. You really don't even get 100% because the government's going to come in and take their cut. Your broker's going to come in and take their cut one way or the other. Even if you are a broker yourself, you've got your licensing fees, your expenses and things like that. And if you focus on reducing expenses, you're selling yourself short of what your true potential is. Too many people focus on saving money. You don't want to focus on saving money, especially when you're in this, when you're able to make this control. You want to focus on generating more income. And what's going to allow you to generate more income? Well, if you've already, and this is what you're going to find out very quickly once you start achieving some success in real estate, is it's not about the money anymore. It's now about your time, that you don't even have time to take on another client because you're too busy with your current clients. You got to do your paperwork, your contracts, and make sure things are submitted on time and an inspection gets done and so on and so forth. So maybe your first thing you do is you bring on an administrative assistant, somebody that's just there. Maybe they're only even working part-time, but somebody that's going to help you make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row, that's going to keep track of all of your paperwork and make sure everything's all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, that nothing's missing, that everything gets turned into the appropriate places on time. And that'll save you a little bit of time, but you're still limited because especially when you're working with buyers, you've got to do showings. Even if you figured out the magic formula to be able to get fewer showings where you're not having to show people 20 or 30 homes and maybe you can show them 5 or 10 homes and they're ready to make a decision and choose a property they want to buy. Even when you're down to that level, there's only so much time you could spend showing people property. So how do you continue to make this transition? Now, like I said, most real estate professionals aren't in this B quadrant, this business quadrant, because really the true definition of this here is that you could walk away from your business and it continues to grow. So that's if you really want to fully move into the B quadrant where you're able to really build a large amount of money, because when you take yourself out of the equation, when you're no longer that integral part to the growth of your business, that business is able to grow without you, which means if you at least still have control over this, if you're still the owner of all of this here, that you're able to grow this and really increase now at whatever rate it is that you want, because you figured out the formula where it doesn't rely any longer on your time. Now, this requires systems, this requires processes, this requires people, this requires money to pay for all of these things. And that's why most people don't make the transition, and why a lot of people trying to make this transition end up failing. And that's why real estate, it's a very low investment to get a real estate license, to be able to be in the capacity to broker real estate deals and earn commission on all of this. It's very low. If you want to go invest in some sort of restaurant, you want to go buy some sort of franchise for Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or whatever the case may be, it's going to cost you probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially when you're factoring in build out of spaces and things like that. So this is a very low level to get into this here. And you've already got a huge, immense potential just as a self-employed person. But I would say, and this is going to depend on your market, that as a self-employed person, without having some business built around you, probably the most you're able to make is maybe $100,000. Maybe you get a little bit more. I've met some agents that do make more than that, just being a one-man or one-woman operation, but you're going to hit a limit. Whereas now you start building yourself out a team. So what are those next steps now once you've maybe got somebody handling the administrative work? Well, you're going to need somebody else to start handling these buyers. Because if you've got a system figured out, if you've got a way to generate buyers, to generate leads of buyers, and generate the leads of buyers at a lower cost than it is for what you're making on this, you have that profit built in there. Now you have the start of a business. Now you have where you could bring in another agent who's going to help you work with these buyers, and now start showing them, maybe to the point where you're able to walk away with this, and now you could shift your focus, because notice how everything we've been talking about so far, you've been focused on buyers. So now maybe you could shift your focus and start looking at sellers and say, okay, you know, everyone's been telling me I've got to work with sellers. I've done maybe a couple seller deals before, but let me figure out a system that I could put in place, just like I have for buyers, that's really going to start turning through sellers. And now you get that level going, but you're never going to get to that point where you could have a sustainable flow of income going to be able to focus on other things until you get that sustainable flow of going. And what's going to get you there? Staying focused. Staying focused. Picking your goal, really fleshing that goal out, what the specifics are. Again, not just the amount of income it is that you want to achieve, but how many properties do you need to sell? How many closings? How many appointments? What are all these details? What are those things that you need to achieve? And start working towards getting those achieved, staying focused on that, and then you can start to make this transition from just being a one-person operation to really starting to build out a business around you. And this is where you start to find more freedom as you move into this level here. Because something happens to you when you pay yourself for things you do yourself. If something happens to you, your income goes away. And that's where a lot of agents get stuck. And it's that pivot, making that pivot of going from, you know, I just want to bring in as much money as I can and keep as much money as I can, to how can I invest in my business that's going to allow my business to grow larger and at the same time continue to bring in money. To bring in more money, because that's the name of the game. The people that do start to make the transition from self-employed to a business, if you're still focused on cutting costs, you're looking at the wrong thing. In this quadrant, as a business, you need to be focused on bringing in the highest amount of revenue, the highest amount of income possible. Yes, it'll come at a cost to do that, but again, the costs are not what is most important here. Over here, as a self-employed person, maybe your annual costs end up being like $10,000. Maybe your costs end up being like $10,000. And you bring in $100,000. So let's say you bring in $100,000 here. So you bring in $100K. You have then $10,000 in cost. So that leaves you with how much money? $90,000. So now you're at $90,000 there. Which, wow, cool, $90,000. But then you realize $90,000, well, I could probably make more money than this. And I want to make more money than this. So how do I make more money than this? And you might say, well, all right, well, I got $10,000 I'm spending, or maybe even if this spends out at $20,000 that you were here. So if this were $20,000, you're walking away then with $80,000. And so maybe you go through and say, how do I make more money? And you say, okay, well, let's reduce my expenses down to $10,000, so then I can make $90,000. But then maybe you have some unexpected expenses that come up, and then the next year you really end up with like $40,000 of expenses. And maybe on top of that something happens to your health, so you're only making $60,000. And now all of a sudden, oh my God, what is this? This is only $20,000 you're walking away with. That's why this is dangerous. This is not sustainable. Even though it's S here, it's not S for sustainable, it's S for being 100% based on yourself, and that's it. But let's say you really get the sweet spot of this year. Like we mentioned in the first place here, that you're bringing in $100,000 of income. And this isn't bad, this is just where you start. S is the start. It's not the finish line. It's just the starting point. It's the start from transitioning away from being an employee. Most people don't even transition away from being an employee. It happens at a larger rate now in 2019 with as easy it is to start a various number of businesses. But this is just where you're starting. That's not the finish line. So let's say though, but you get to this $10,000 of expenses, so you really got yourself worked into the sweet spot there. But you find yourself not able to make anything more than $100,000 because there's only so much time that you have. Now let's say over here on the business side that you've got $100,000 of expenses. $100,000 of expenses. What one would you rather have? Would you rather have $10,000 in expenses or $100,000 in expenses? Not 100 million, 100,000. Now, if I were to just ask you, would you rather have $10,000 or $100,000 in expenses, you'd probably say $10,000, but you're saying, well, how much money are we talking about? How much money would I be making for the $100,000 in expenses? And that's the right question that you want to ask. Because if you're spending $100,000 and maybe you're not able to be as profitable here as you are, or maybe you are, because if you're keeping the same rate where 10% are expenses, that would mean you have $1 million. But let's be conservative here. You won't get to that. That's maybe the point where you want to figure out how to tweak this and get it better. But let's say you're just making $500,000. And your expenses are $100,000. So now you're left with $400,000. So it's pretty obvious which one you would want, right? Would you want the $90,000 or would you want $400,000? And you say, well, John, what if my expenses are higher here? I mean, that's a lot of money I'm spending. What if I have to spend more money? What if I have to spend $200,000? Okay, well, now you only have $300,000 coming in. Only. And now how about over here? Let's say that, oh, well, John, what if I really do bad? What if I have like $300,000 in expenses? Well, you know, that would only be more than double the income that you have down here. So yes, this comes at a higher cost. Let's even assume this here, where we're paying now. We went from having, this is really not a safe estimation here, where you're just assuming that you're only going to have 10% expenses. Maybe you get to that point, but it's probably not going to happen initially. And maybe when you first start growing your business here, now this is, again, there's a lot more to it here. These are just the simple numbers of this here, but if it breaks down to this, where you bring in $500,000 at the cost of $300,000 running like a 60% expenses, that's still $200,000 you're able to walk away with. And if we keep this up at the same rate, because we're no longer now part of this process, and this is where you start to really kind of move even more towards this investor quadrant, but this is really the most passive out of all this at all here. Let's say that you're bringing in now $1 million, because when you're no longer part of the equation, you really get to choose how much money it is that you want to make. Yes, you have to do it right to a certain extent. There's going to be expenses associated with this. And let's say that you've got $600,000 now of expenses. You doubled your income, but you also doubled your expenses. Well, now you've got $400,000 coming in. And really the sky's the limit as you start to figure this out more. But you're not going to get to making $400,000 a year in this S quadrant typically as a real estate professional. That would be extremely rare. I don't think I've met any single real estate agent I've met a couple who generate more than 100,000, but the most I've had somebody tell me they've made as a single agent is like 150, 160,000. I don't even know if they were telling the truth there, if they're really making that much money, or at least that was probably their gross commission income, not how much money they were actually bringing in. Because there are ways to outsource things. There are all these services. You don't even have to do your advertising. You just pay Zillow or Realtor.com for your advertising. So, maybe it is possible, but the point I'm trying to make is that you will make more money when this is done correctly in the B quadrant here, because this is where you start to build something bigger. This is typically going to be much more stable and sustainable than being a self-employed person when you're transitioned into this business quadrant. But the only way you're going to get there is by staying focused. Staying focused on what you're doing right now, making sure that this is the right thing first and foremost. So you've got to have that larger goal of what you're trying to achieve broken down into specific targets that you're achieving that move you toward this overall larger goal. You stay focused on that. So again, going through that real estate thing we're talking about here, maybe you're starting out working with buyers, and then you start to transition into sellers because you've got the buyer stream of income coming. And so now you're moved over into sellers, and now you've got a stream of income from sellers. And so then maybe you want to get to the point where you've got both of these levels here growing on their own without you, with you being able to walk away with this. You could start taking this money that you're making here, and this is where you could now move into being an investor. Why can you be an investor now? Because you've got the money to be an investor. You need money to be an investor. If you don't have money, you're in the business quadrant. You're in the S quadrant. The investor is where you're taking money, you're putting money somewhere, and you're turning that money into more money. Now, with investments like that, that requires time. It takes time for this to turn into a larger share of money, and it takes also a lot of money to be able to have this big multiple coming through here. All these no money down type of situations and things like that you see advertised out there, that's usually over here. You're not really an investor. You're a self-employed person that's owning a job, that's maybe leveraging financing and things like that to stretch this to its limit, but it still requires work on your part, and that's why it's not a true investment. If it requires work, it's not an investment. A investment is where it really requires almost no work. You set that up, and even most investments still require work. Even if you're not doing it, you're paying somebody to do that work for you on it here. But this all starts with establishing the income. Now, again, you usually start off as an employee. You're working at some job somewhere. You probably don't like it, so that's why you're considering, hey, I want to go get my real estate license. And then that's where you start off as a self-employed person, as everyone does in the real estate industry. No one starts off as a massive business in real estate. They start as a self-employed person. Maybe they achieve success quicker because they're doing the right things, they've got the right training, and they're taking the right levels of action, but they're still a self-employed person, at least for some time, until they start bringing on and building a team. That's why you see teams becoming so popular in real estate, because it's a business. And you might ask that question, well, what about me as a new agent? I'm a new agent. Do I want to go work at one of these teams in one of these businesses? Well, in that case, you're not really achieving what you got into real estate for, because you probably got into real estate to do your own thing. So if you go join a team, you're really now an employee of that business. Even if you are still an independent contractor, even if you are still getting paid on commission, you're not even getting any hourly wages or salary or anything like that, you're still an employee. We're going to take a quick commercial break, so stick with us. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching State of Real Estate. Hey, so if you're thinking about starting a real estate career, it could feel a little overwhelming sometimes. Look, that's completely understandable. That's why we're here to help. If you haven't already, check out our Success Center, tampaschool.com/success, or if you don't even know where to begin, give us a call. We'd love to help you out. We've got advisors standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way it is that we can. Our phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. Give us a call. We're the Tampa School of Real Estate. You're watching State of Real Estate. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of State of Real Estate. My name is John Christmo, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We're almost out of time today, but what I want to do is recap what we've been talking about. So we've been talking about how important it is to stay focused. You're not going to achieve something that you want to do unless you stay focused on it. You want to get good at playing some musical instrument. Let's say you want to learn how to play the piano. If you don't stay focused on learning how to play that piano, you're never going to learn how to play that piano. Same thing applies in business. If you're working with buyers, pour gas on that. Pour fuel on the fire. Make that fire burn hotter. Build it into more of a business. Work towards that scale of building this into something that's repeatable, that's scalable. So that's a big buzzword when you're talking about startup companies and things like that, is scalable. Your real estate business can be scalable, but most agents aren't focusing on scaling. They're instead focused on this other S word of their self. Quit thinking about yourself. Quit thinking about saving. Think about how you could generate more income and what it's going to cost to generate that additional income. This is the number you want to be thinking about, the gross commission income coming in. If it costs money to get that gross commission income, so be it. It will cost money. It's always going to cost money to make money, especially to make money at higher levels. Maybe you can kind of cheat the system a little bit and make a little bit of money without spending any money, but when you want to make more money, you need to spend money. It's almost irrefutable law of business. If you want to make more money, you're going to probably have to spend more money. But if you're walking away with more and more money, if you go from 90 to 200 to 400 like we've been breaking down here, then what's the problem with increasing your expenses if you're still walking away with more money in your pocket? That's repeatable. That's scalable. But it doesn't rely just and revolve around yourself. This is where you have other people. This is where you're going to have to loosen your reins. This is where you have others helping you achieve this common goal. And yes, they're going to want to be paid for helping you achieve that common goal. And this is something that takes a lot of training. There's a lot of specifics to this. There's going to be, no matter how much training you've done, you'll still have those experiences where they're going to be learning experiences, or also as they're known as failures, where you mess something up. But you want to stay focused. You stay focused. You stay committed. You stay persistent. You stay perseverant. And you will achieve the success if you stay focused on it. Don't just give up and go try something else, because that you quitting on that one thing is the one way to guarantee that that's not going to generate any income. So look, that's about all the time I've got for you guys today on staying focused. If you take away one thing from today's show, it's stay focused. That's why we named this the title. Super straightforward, super to the point. Stay focused. Pick something you want to do, stay focused on it until you achieve it, and then once you've got that going, if you want to build your business larger, that's where you could start to try to automate that, bring in other people, Yes, it's going to cost you money. Yes, you're going to have to pay these people for working with these buyers, but if you want to be able to transition to sellers, or vice versa, however you want to do this here, maybe you're going to focus maybe working with investors or in commercial real estate, or however it is that you want to grow your business. We chose a very specific example today, which probably a lot of you can relate to out there, because I know there's a lot of you guys out there that work specifically with buyers, and maybe you're thinking about working with sellers and really having a proven system to acquire listings and so on and so forth. But that's only going to come after you stay focused. So that's all the time we've got for today. If you've got questions on getting your real estate license, you got to do post-licensing, continuing education, or you want to find out more about the sales training courses that we're now offering here, really not even just sales training, but specific real estate sales training. So real-world information that you want to learn that doesn't have to meet any FREC requirements or anything like that, right to the point of what's going to help you become successful. We're putting together a lot of great content for a whole platform on training to really help you become successful. So if you're interested in that, getting your license, or any continuing education or post-licensing you need to do, call us at 813-333-2676. Again, that's 813-333-2676. That's about all the time I've got for you guys today. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Are you studying for your Florida real estate exam? If you are, you need to check out our Pass First Try strategy. You're going to love this. It's 4 steps that we break down the process to study for your Florida real estate exam. So you're set up to pass your Florida real estate exam, because that's what you're studying for, right? To pass your exam. It's 4 steps. Number 1, you learn the information. You've got to learn this to be able to pass the exam, but it doesn't stop at learning. Step 2, you've got to reinforce the basic, simple, key concepts. As you learn this information, keep reviewing the simple things. You don't need to know everything, but you got to review these basic key concepts. Step 3, you've got to test your knowledge. The exam's going to test your knowledge, so if you don't test your knowledge in advance, you won't find out if you know what you think you know until you take the exam. And then step 4 is be confident and prepared, because even if you know this material, you need to be confident that you know the material. Check out the full strategy at passfirsttry.com. That's passfirsttry.com. You're watching State of Real Estate.